Some of the dots over the eyes are further to the right as well, which show that he misses the goal. It may be that he needs to rely on other people for achieving his goals when he does actually meet those goals. Well, grand day rising everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Now, probably many of you don't know, but for many years, decades in fact, I have done graphology or handwriting analysis, which basically means I can analyse people's personality and career traits through their handwriting. Today I'm going to analyse the handwriting of Sir Keir Starmer. Now, before I start, this video is for entertainment purposes only. It is a story, not fact. Please do your own research to come to your own conclusions. So let's begin. Now, what I'm analysing today is the letter that Sir Keir Starmer wrote to Angela Rayner in his own hand when she resigned. You will probably notice that there is a slight slant to the left, which is usually indicative of somebody with a more reserved disposition than somebody outgoing. However, his handwriting does look like he might be left-handed. I'm not sure whether he is or not. So in that case, he might be slightly more extroverted in this context. However, we need to remember that Angela Rayner was his colleague, so he would have had a working relationship with her and therefore maybe less on his guard. He's also written in blue pen. Now, blue is maybe used by somebody of a little more caring in nature, but again, he may have generally liked her as a colleague. It might have even been the only pen he had handy at the time, but that's normally what's assumed. Whereas using a black biro is somebody maybe a little more in the vein of the head ruling the heart rather than the other way round. The second thing we notice is that some of his T-bars are more to the left than the right, although in general they do slope upwards, which is a sign of having goals. But the fact of the matter is there's a lack of dots over some of the eyes, which might indicate therefore that he doesn't necessarily know what he wants and is there unable to decide what his goals are. Some of the dots over the eyes are further to the right as well, which show that he misses the goal. It may be that he needs to rely on other people for achieving his goals when he does actually meet those goals. You will also note that some of the dots over the eyes are pretty high up, which can indicate somebody who has, let's say, a well-developed ego. This may make them a little more recalcitrant or resistant to change or thinking outside the box. Now, also, I note that the E's are mostly quite closed rather than more like an ear shape, and that in fact indicates that he's not a particularly good listener, nor is he necessarily a very good talker. He often doesn't have much to say. He's quite guarded, although there are O's that are slightly open, so he can talk when he wants to. The writing is pretty free-flowing, so he feels quite confident in writing this memo to Angela Rayner. He has put his full stops in, so he can be assertive, and once his mind's made up, that's usually it. So possibly what he says goes. He may not necessarily be open to change or a different way of thinking. I also notice that there's a fair number of gaps between the words, which indicates somebody who is not necessarily one for making a large number of friends or acquaintances. He probably enjoys time on his own and is probably quite selective about who, if anybody, he chooses to associate himself with on a personal level. And in work, he probably sees himself more of a self-starter, although, as I've said before, he maybe doesn't get off the starting block as often as he ought. Mostly his writing slants slightly upwards, which is a more optimistic outlook, but given the other traits that his handwriting reveals, that optimism may not necessarily be entirely realistic. Now, his handwriting style is quite loose and fluent, so he may feel quite confident about communicating in this situation, which he may be, and he may see himself as an effective communicator. But one does wonder whether that is a genuine ability to communicate easily, or whether some of it may be chatter in an attempt to get himself out of a particular situation. So how much of it is authentic and how much of it is not? That seems to be a little bit of a mystery. And I'm being open-minded here and non-judgmental. In some cases, there are closer spaces between the words, so he is capable of having valued relationships, whether that's personally or whether that is professionally. But as I've said, that is more selective. He's not a particularly physical person. Indeed, it may benefit him if he spends more time on various physical activities, even taking walks or spending time in a garden, for example, or in sports, or maybe going to watch the football. It might open him up to more free-flowing ideas if he finds he's stuck in a situation that he isn't able to work through and find alternative resolutions to. He tends to be fairly tight-lipped about things in general. He doesn't have big loops on his G's either, which is usually associated with gregariousness or sociability. He has some interesting hooks, which you could see as a loop, but these tend to be a little bit inconsistent. It really does depend with this gentleman who he's actually dealing with and how much of what he says is regarded as meaningful. He has one or two spelling mistakes as well. So we've got independent advisor. He's put advisor rather than advisor. So he doesn't necessarily always pay attention to detail because, of course, this is a man of law and he's certainly educated. But there's that little lack of attention to detail. And that's certainly the case where the dots on the I's are more to the right rather than over the I. There's probably a touch of arrogance here, He's certainly got something of an ego. I think this gentleman, when he's made his mind up, that will be it. Even though not all of his writing is joined up, I think there are instances where he's, say, strong-willed or single-minded and determined. You'll also notice that the M's are quite angular and there's a downward slant on the second half of the M. This denotes a diplomat, and in politics this is an important skill in order to be able to get people on your side, to push policies through and to garner support. In respect of the angular shape of the M, this signifies somebody who is quick thinking and likes a challenge. And indeed he may like a challenge, even though, as we've already seen, he doesn't necessarily achieve what he sets out to do. However, it is very important, not just in politics but also in law. We need to remember he was a man of the law, to be quick thinking and sharp in a courtroom, because of course you're there to represent your client and you need to be able to present their case in a credible manner and ask all the right questions, because of course your job is to ensure that your client wins the case. So Sir Keir is certainly capable of laying on the charm, but it depends on the circumstances. If he feels comfortable in his situation, then his speech and thought patterns are probably going to be a bit more free-flowing. But if he feels uncomfortable in a situation, then he may find everything a little more challenging. So that's just a little analysis of Keir Starmer's handwriting. So let me have your thoughts. What do you think? Do you think what I have said reflects your own observations perhaps? I always find it very interesting with handwriting, because people's handwriting can vary according to not just who they're writing to or what they're writing, but also in terms of maybe how they're feeling on a particular day. And it's interesting sometimes to contrast the writing that somebody produces between one decade and another decade, because people do change, things happen. Anyway, let me have your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please comment, please share and subscribe, ring the notification bell. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for something else. Until then, bye for now.